Welcome, friends, to Farm Fresh Designs 59. Well, friends, these projects that I'm going to show you today are some projects that I've been wanting to do for the past 3 months. So I finally have time to work on them. So I'm excited to share them with you. My first project is a little tin, and it's similar to the Altoid tins, but I bought these off of Amazon. So I painted the outside and the inside with Rust-Oleum linen white chalk paint. And on this inside piece, and then also on the top, I'm going to be using the IOD paint inlay called Lattice Rose. And I love the way that it turned out. And if you've not used an inlay before, you put the first coat of paint on and you let it dry. And then when you put your second coat on, you put it just a little bit thicker. You lay that paint inlay in it. And then you let it dry, and then you re-wet it again, and then you pull it up gently, and it turns out beautiful. So I've got that paint inlay on the inside, and so now I'm putting together all of the pieces that are going to go on the inside of this little tin. Now on the other side of the inside of this tin, these are some little stickers that I got off of Amazon. And then those 3 little rectangle pieces are cardstock covered with some fabric. And it just resembles little bolts of fabric. And then this little dress form is something that I believe I bought off of Amazon. And it is just a miniature of a dress form. And I painted that with linen white chalk paint. And I put little pink polka dots on it. Now these 3 little pieces of fabric, I'm just gluing those together so that when I glue them to the inside, it'll just look real cohesive. And then I put them on with hot glue. Now some other little pieces that I'm going to put on the inside are some little teeny squares that have miniature buttons on it. And all of these are some pieces that you would normally put in like a little dollhouse. And then I'm going to add a little miniature pair of scissors and a little miniature tape or a measuring tape that you would use in sewing. Now, the reason that I love this so much is I started sewing when I was 8 years old, and I am 65 now, so I've been sewing for a really long time. And so pieces like this just bring back so many sweet memories to me, and I still love to sew. And then I found a little wooden spool that had some thread on it that I glued that to the inside. Now on the outside, I put that paint inlay on it, and this is just a little piece of lace because when my daughter was small, I made all of her dresses, and this was one of my favorite laces, and I still had some left. So I decided to use this on my little tin. And then I go back on the inside and put a little bit of that lace on the inside. Now on the outside, I'm going to be making some resin castings, and these are just some different molds that I bought off of Etsy and Amazon. And the first one that I'm going to be using is just a little dress that has lots of layers and ruffles in it. And then this is just a little hanger. And actually, when I made it and I pulled it out, it broke. But I went with it. So I painted it, and I'm going to glue all of these on with Titebond Thick and Quick. Oh, and I also painted them with Rust-Oleum Blush Pink. So that little teeny piece that broke off, I just saved that, and I glued that on as well, and you can't really tell that it was broken. And that's what the outside of the piece looks like. And then I decided to go back and put a little bit of white wax over that little pink resin casting of the dress. And here's the final piece, and I just love it. And if you'll look at the fabric that's on those little rectangles, those are actually some scraps of fabric from the dresses that I made my daughter when she was a little girl. And I have scraps from all of the dresses that I made her, and one day I want to make a quilt with all of those scraps, in my free time. So my next piece is just a little, I guess it's maybe MDF or heavy cardboard. And I think I bought this at the Dollar General. It was actually a Christmas piece. And I pulled the paper off. And I'm painting this with that same Rust-Oleum blush pink. So now once it's dry, I'm going to use the IOD stamp called Veranda, and I'm going to use the large lattice, and I use IOD stone gray ink, and I just leave it on the big piece of plastic because I'm just going to be using a little piece of it. And then I have a little tool that I'll list down at the bottom, and I use that to rub on the ink, rub on top of the stamp to get that ink to set up. And then I just took a little bit of script from the stamp, the IOD stamp called Ephemera Type, and put that up at the top. Now these are some resin castings that you saw the little molds a while ago, and it's a little dress form, and then it's two little perfume bottles. And so I go ahead and I paint those with Rust-Oleum linen white chalk paint, and I'm going to put that on with Titebond Thick and Quick. Now, once I put these three pieces on, I realized that the white is just a little bit too stark, and I want to kind of change it up a little bit so you can really see the detail in these pieces. So after I get it all the pieces on and it dries really well, then I go back, and instead of putting clear wax on it, I decide to put white wax on it. And I know you're thinking, but Myra, why would you want to put white wax on top of white? Well, I decided that I was going to use Dixie Belle Grunge Gray, and I was afraid that it would come out too dark. So I felt like if I used white wax, then that would make that grunge gray wax sort of muted, and I like the way it turned out. And actually, in the pictures, it looks a little bit darker than what it does in person. So you let that white wax set for about 30 minutes, and then I go back in with the grunge gray, and then I just use a shop towel to like rub it back, and then that way the grunge gray wax kind of sinks into the crevices, and it really shows the detail of these pieces. And this could be like a little shelf that you could hang on the wall, and you could just put some little pieces of jewelry on, or it can just be a little shelf sitter. But if you notice, you're going to see a theme in this video, and it has to do with a lot of dress forms. Now, I wanted to add one more little piece to this vignette. So this is a book that I bought off of Amazon, and this is a little girl sitting at a sewing machine. And honestly, I'm just going to put this little picture in a little frame that I thrifted. And the reason that I pulled this particular picture out is because the little girl has blonde hair, which my granddaughter has blonde hair, and she's sitting at a sewing machine. And even though my granddaughter is 5 years old, she's already ready for Grammy to teach her how to sew. So this past summer, we actually started sewing, and it was just very basic. And she would sit on my lap, and I would help her to just sew little pillows, and she loved it. And she's really interested in sewing more as she gets a little bit older. So here's the next two pieces of a vignette that could go along with this tin. So what do you think? And as I'm sitting here doing the voiceover for this video, I realized that instead of putting that script up at the top of this one particular piece, I could have put a bow with some buttons on the knot. Or I could have used some buttons in different sort of ways on this particular piece, because I also have a lot of vintage buttons that I've had for a really long time. Okay, in my videos in the last month, I have used this caulking, and I actually bought it off of, or at Walmart, back in the hardware section. And I love the way it does, but now, because it's caulking and it's going to take really long to dry, it's not going to do well in the IOD molds because they're too thick. And so these little pink molds are what people use in like cake decorating. And I bought most of these off of Amazon. So I don't put anything in the molds. I just go ahead and start out by putting this caulking in, and I'll make sure to link it in the description box below. And it takes at least 24 hours to dry. So if you're going to do this technique, it's going to take a little bit extra long than just using air dry clay or resin. But I like the way it turns out. And it's really sort of messy, and you get it all over your hands. And then it's kind of hard to kind of scrape away that extra. But when you pull it out, that little extra that's on the edges, it's really thin and you can just sort of pinch it off. So this is another little dress form that I thrifted a while back, and I painted it black for some reason or another. And remember, I've been wanting to do this for a long time. So why I painted it black initially, I don't really know. So all of these little pieces of caulking molds are dry now, and I'm just going to kind of lay them all over the front of this. And so I just go on and put tight bond glue all over the front of it. And it's fine that there's going to be extra. And one thing that I like about these molds that are made out of caulking is they're very flexible and they stay flexible. So that's the part that I really like about it. And so initially I have kind of a pattern that I'm going to do on this. And then as it goes along, I just kind of play with it here and there and just lay them out until it just looks right to me. And even though I've got all this extra glue on it, it dries clear. So when I go back to paint it, I'm just going to paint over the whole thing, and I'm going to paint over that little extra glue that's on the little parts that didn't have a mold on it. Now the base of this dress form, it actually kind of wiggles a little bit, and after the first time of putting the molds on, then I got smart and I just was able to pull that bottom part off. So I'm going back in with Rust-Oleum Blush Pink, and that is not something that I can find at Walmart. I actually had to order it off of the Target website. I haven't been able to find it anyplace else. And I just paint over the entire dress form all over the front, and it kind of pushed that paint down into those molds. And then I decide to go ahead and paint the back side of it. And then I'm going to show you again that I made some more molds from the caulking. And this time on the back side, when I laid them out, I actually put a little bit more thought into it. And I laid all of the pieces on the top. And then I laid them off to the side and just kind of kept count of what I was putting on there. And then I liked the way the back side turned out a little bit better. And then I just felt like I needed to put, some more on the side and over there where the arms are. And I just really love the way that this turned out. So I'm going to let you watch as I put on these back pieces and just look at the way that I put the different pieces on. So friends, this was like putting a puzzle together, but I had a lot of fun doing it. So after it gets all painted, then I go back with Dixie Belle white wax and I put it on really heavy because I want those details to show. And I'll show it to you in just a second. But before I do that, I want to show you another dress form that I've been holding on to, kind of waiting until I had a chance to do this. And in the video, it looks pink, but it's not, it's white. And so this is another mold made from caulking, and I used this particular mold in some previous videos. And I'm only going to put this caulking mold down at the base of the dress form. And I start out on the front side, but I make it meet in the back side. Now, once I'm ready to put the transfer on right in the middle, I make sure that I have sprayed it with Rust-Oleum Clear Sealer just so that that transfer will go on a lot easier, because the paint that I use does not automatically have a sealer in it. Now, this transfer comes from the IOD Fairy Tale Florals that came out last either spring or summer. I can't remember. And it's just a beautiful muted purple. And because this particular transfer is going on a rounded surface, then I make some little slits all around it, and that helps it to lay down. And once I'm comfortable with how it's laying, then I use the transfer tool to just push that transfer onto the surface and go back around all the edges. And if part of it doesn't go on, then I just lay that plastic back down and I rub over it again, and then it transfers beautifully. And in that transfer set, I just took out all of the pieces that was that particular color, and in that little floral little spray, and then I just kind of cut it up, and I put it some up at the front, and I put it kind of going down on the sides, and I just made it work. So never be afraid of cutting up your transfers and just making it work for you, because when it's all said and done, it looks like it just is supposed to be that way. And then once I get all of these transfers on, I use some of that plastic sheeting that comes on top of the transfers, and I just rub back over all of it, and that's called burnishing it. But because I wanted it to be just a little bit extra, then I took some of the script out of the transfer set called Lover of Flowers, and I just cut up little different pieces of the script, not intending for it to be a certain sentence or certain words. I just kind of cut it up here and there, and I put a little bit down at the bottom, and I put a little bit up at the top, and just kind of here and there. And I think that just adds just another dimension to it, and it just adds a little bit of extra interest to it. And I really debated about finishing this piece altogether. And so down at the bottom on that caulking mold, what I ended up using was Dixie Belle Farmhouse Green. And I played with a lot of different green paints that I have, and this one just seemed to match the best. So that's why you're going to see a little bit darker paint on some of the pieces, because I was just kind of playing with different greens that I had. And then after that, I just left it because I was afraid that if I used a little bit more green, it would look just a little bit too busy. So what do you think? Would you put green up at the top where the little knob is? Would you put it down at the base? Or would you just leave it just like that? And here's my 2 dress forms that have been sitting in my stash that I thrifted quite some time ago, just waiting for me to finish these for the video. And I love the way they turned out. And it just is so me. It's really frilly and girly, and it just has so much to do with sewing. And I remember growing up, whenever I would go to my grandmother's house, she would have the sewing machine out ready with some fabric, and she'd say, "Okay, girlfriend, sit down. Let's get you some clothes made before school starts back." So I've made my clothes for a really long time. So what do you think? And also, do you like to sew? It is brought me so much joy over the years being able to make things for my family and friends. Now, the last 3 projects have actually been made since before Christmas, but I just didn't have time to put the video out. And this is some of the Roycycle paper that comes in the Sonnets Maker's box. And I love it. And it's all these different silhouettes. And I just love the way these pieces turned out. And I was glad that I was able to pop them into a video. So on this particular silhouette, because I'm going to be putting it on a dark surface, I painted the back side white. Because when you decoupage something, it just does better when you decoupage it to a white background. And it helps that decoupage paper to really pop. But because I'm putting this on a black surface, then I needed the backside painted white just so that it wouldn't kind of pull in the black from the backside of this painted piece. And this is just one of those bottle caps that you can get. I believe I got it at the Dollar Tree. And I just painted it black, and then I put it all on with just some Mod Podge. But I want to finish it off. So this is some of that gold beaded trim that you can get at Hobby Lobby. And I just glued it on all around the edge, just kind of jazz it up just a little bit. And because this beading ribbon is plastic and it's not metal, it went on really well with hot glue. But if it had been metal, I would have needed to put it on with Titebond Thick and Quick. And I also used this beaded trim to hang it with. And so I glued those little extra pieces on the back side with hot glue so they wouldn't stick out. Now this next little frame is just a little thrifted frame that I got a really long time ago. And it was painted gold, but I needed it to be black. But then I wanted to have some extra something on the frame so that I could put the gold gilding wax on it. And so I used, I believe I used salt wash, and I added that to the black paint just to give it some texture. Now, this is the back side of the frame, and so I'm using the veranda stamp again with the lattice, but this time I use some gold ink, and I get this at Hobby Lobby. And because I want it to really pop out. And with the veranda stamp, I promise you, it is so easy to match up this lattice. So if you've got this stamp and you haven't tried to use the lattice before, I encourage you to do it because it's a lot of fun. And in the Sonnets Maker's box, she added this little wood piece, and so I glued that right in the middle. Now there's another silhouette that I'm going to put on the back side of a clear cloche that's made with the mold, the IOD mold called La Cloches, and I made it with clear resin. So I did the reverse decoupage on the back side, and all the little trim on that cloche on the front side I painted black, and then I put gold gilding wax on it. And then I love the way these 3 pieces came out. I just think that they're just so elegant. And yes, those are the Christmas trees that I had out before Christmas. And I had already videotaped this part, so I just decided not to try to retape it without the Christmas trees. But I just never could fit it into a video before Christmas. So what do you think? I love these silhouettes, and it reminds me of, those little silhouettes that people used to have when I was a little girl. And I actually never had that done with my children's silhouettes. So, that's really got me thinking about, do I need to do that for my grandchildren? And who would do that for me? So friends, we are at the end of the video today, and here's all of the pieces that are shabby chic and just really girly, but it's just the things that I love. I love anything that has to do with sewing. So in the comments below, tell me which piece was your favorite today. It's really hard for me to choose. I may have to choose the little tin because those are so much fun to make. And my husband and I were talking recently, and we were talking about some different things that I was working on. And I reminded him that when I was little, one of my favorite things to do at school was to make those little dioramas where you made a scene inside of like a little shoebox. And amazingly, he didn't know what I was talking about. I couldn't believe that he went through all those years of school and he never made one. But it was always something that I enjoyed when I was little. So now that I'm grown, here I am. I'm still making them. And it doesn't have anything to do with something I need to do at school. It's just making those little scenes of different things that I love. But I was so glad that I finally had time to make all of these projects, because every time I walked past my stash and I saw those dress forms there, oh, I just wanted to work on them so bad, but just didn't have time because I had other projects that I needed to finish. So what do you think? And friends, also, I have a Facebook page and it's called Farm Fresh Designs. And I try to do live videos there, and it's projects that you're not going to see on YouTube. So make sure that you go to Farm Fresh Designs on Facebook and follow my page so that, we can sort of chat online as I'm doing these live projects. And I hope as the new year rolls around and my schedule seems to kind of be a little bit lighter, that I'll have more time to do live videos on Facebook. And I hope you had a wonderful Christmas and a happy New Year. And I'm excited about the different projects that are coming up as we hopefully inch toward a little bit warmer weather. So if you enjoyed the video today, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you in my next video. Thank you, friends.